Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Sophia, and I run events here at the Strand. Before we launch into a discussion of Jen Spyra's debut short story collection, Big Time, I'd like to share a little bit of history about the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled from 4 to 8 bookstores until, after 93 years, the Strand is the sole survivor, now run by third-generation owner Nancy Bass Wyden. We want to thank all of you for your support. Without our loyal community of book lovers and authors, we wouldn't be here today. Tonight, we're thrilled to have with us Jen Spyra for the launch of her debut book, Big Time. Jen Spyra is a former staff writer for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, and before that, The Onion. Her writing has appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Times, McSweeney's, and elsewhere. She lives in New York City. Big Time is her first book. Joining Jen in conversation is Mike Sachs. Mike Sachs works for Vanity Fair and contributes humor to The New Yorker, Time, Esquire, GQ, Believer, Vice, Salon, McSweeney's, The New York Times, The Washington Post, and other publications. He is the author of 8 books and 3 audio projects. His latest, Stinker Lets Loose and Randy, are out in April. So, without further ado, please welcome Jen Spyra and Mike Sachs to the stage.
Hello, am I on? Oh,
Mike.
I'm always on.
There's my boy. That's right.
There's my boy. Listen, Jen, first of all, I have to say, I'm a huge fan of yours. I love the book, and this is absolutely so fun that you asked me to do this. I really appreciate it.
Mike, I asked you because I am your fan, and that is why I wanted you to launch this.
Well, we love each other, but did you ever think growing up as a kid in Pittsburgh, you'd be doing a book event at the Strand in New York City?
In Savannah? No, I really didn't. I mean, I wasn't into comedy as a kid. Like most of my friends that I've met as an adult in my professional comedy writing life at The Onion and The Late Show, everyone grew up watching Letterman and watching Conan. And I was watching 7 hours of daytime TV at the JCC every single day. I think I've mentioned to you before that from 1990 to 97, I watched 8 hours of TV a day. It wasn't good either. I mean, so I didn't choose that, but I mean, the stuff I chose that informed my sensibility later was like old Hollywood. And then I really only became a real student of comedy senior year of college and early adult life.
I think that's really interesting because a lot of people who get into comedy only know comedy, but I think there's an advantage to knowing genres beyond comedy.
So agree. And I remember when I was doing improv so hardcore in college after, that was a thing that Del Close, who's, like the grandfather of improv, and also this hilarious actor improviser dude, Billy Merritt, that was their thing. They were like, if you want to do improv and comedy, don't major in theater, don't major in filmmaking, be a history major or something else. And you just need to cast such a wide net so you have really diverse material to churn and digest. I do find, and I find that's why I have to that's why I try to read so widely in like basically all different types of genres so that I can fold it back in.
Yeah, I think it's really important to look where others aren't. And if you're looking towards the left and no one's looking there, I think that's a big advantage for a comedy writer. And
Yeah.
I see this in your book. There's so many influences in there that I see that are not comedic.
That's so true. You're right. I mean, it's funny because you talk to comedy writing people, and when I think about my influences, like, yeah, there are comedy writers that I'm obsessed with, but then most of my influences aren't comedy. They're really serious things that then, because I'm me and I'm demented, I think about and then put some kind of torque on.
All right, well, let's talk about some of those influences. I mean, you say they weren't comedy, but as far as books, were there any books and authors in any time periods that interested you, that you read as a kid that later influenced your comedic sensibility?
Well, there were certainly genres and specific books that I read as a kid that just burrowed so deep. They always knock around in my head. And so they did get regurgitated in different ways in the book. So that kind of stuff, I mean, you know, the world of R.L. Stine, the world of Beatrix Potter. There's that classic Raymond Briggs cartoon from the 80s about a boy who built a snowman and the snowman magically comes to life. And it's a Christmas special. Those are just things that I just loved completely, sincerely, unironically as a child and are always in my mind. But I mean, yeah. And then actually as a teen in college, I was an English major. I was just obsessed with 19th century American and British fiction and the darkest stuff, you know? I mean, really loved Hardy, really loved the Brontes, who, by the way, I still don't know which one is which. And before this talk, I was like, that might come up and I'm going to sound really stupid, but I don't know which one is which. I'll never know.
I was going to ask you which one's your favorite, Charlotte, Anne Maria, or Elizabeth. You don't have a favorite of those?
Oh, that's great. Anne Maria? Is that what you said for one of them?
Well, there's Anne and then Maria.
Oh.
There's four.
Look how dumb, Mike. You tried to make a joke that I could actually play with. You did reveal me to be even dumber than I said. I didn't know there were four.
So what was it about that time period? I mean, the Bronte sisters, I don't often hear that mentioned as being a comedic influence.
Yes, I think that actually there's almost something campy and melodramatic about Bronte plots and Bronte worlds, because the stakes are so high and there is no humor at all. And that's kind of funny because it's so, I mean, it's like, I think of, I mean, I always as a kid, and now as a kid, I loved Edgar Allan Poe short stories, love them now. And I loved the Vincent Price movies of the different Edgar Allan Poe stories. Pit and the Pendulum was a big one. And it's hilarious, but it's dead serious. And I guess, yeah, I like how the stakes are high and the humorlessness of the author is almost funny to me.
Right, because when you deal with rigidity, you can play off of that very easily.
Exactly. So that's why it's really bait for a comedy mind.
All right, so you're a teenager and you're reading early 20th century, late 19th century literature. Did you find yourself, like a lot of comedy writers were as a child, a bit of an outsider?
Yes, I did. I mean, you know, it's funny because there have been different times when I remember when I started Colbert and, you know, it was, I don't know if it was Stephen who was asking me or other people, like, how did you get this way? You know, basically, where did your comedic perspective come from? And initially when I was thinking about this, I was like, gee, it's really weird because I had the best home life, my parents, my sister and friends, and it was all, I was normal, except that what wasn't normal was, one, I had scoliosis and wore back brace for like a year and a half in high school. And that will really give you an outside perspective. So I wore this back brace briefly. I had an operation when I was 15, where I had this enormous tumor removed. I had to go to the hospital for a long time. Dealing with a few little health issues as an early teen, I just had a weird perspective that my friends kind of didn't have. And I didn't really talk about it with them, but it made me feel almost like chosen or marked in a way that, even though those were bad things that I was marked for, it made me feel like, oh, I'm different and different things happen to me.
Do you think that's necessary to look at the world as a comedic writer, to look at it from the outside, not to be a part of the cool group, the popular group, to be a little bit different?
I think it 1000% is. And I think it actually helps in two ways, because it helps artistically in the way that you just described. And then it also helps in terms of the stamina that you need to wade through the desert of rejection that will be your early or entire career.
That's something they don't teach in writing school, the rejection.
No, they don't.
Isn't that interesting though? I mean, the rejection is rough. And I never heard that from writing teachers, I think because they were all tenured, so they couldn't be fired. But when you're out there trying to hustle, you're going to see a lot of rejection.
You're right. And it's its own skill to be able to metabolize it. And actually, I don't deal with it well at all. It's so embarrassing to me how every little cut hurts. And then I guess the only thing though that is good is that somehow I'm able to keep going, because I still, everything sticks with me, and I remember it all.
Well, I found that you choose this life to be a writer, and the highs are going to be high and the lows are going to be low, but at least it's going to be interesting. You're not showing up every day at an office park to work as an accountant. There's going to be surprises at every turn. You're off the path, basically.
Exactly. I mean, I honestly get like a teeny bit of vertigo when I think of like, holy shit, I can't believe this is my life, that I've made this into my job, because it feels like, but for the grace of God. I'm sorry I mean, like, no, I just don't know what I could do.
I totally agree. But let's talk about that. I mean, what was comedy, working in comedy as a kid in Squirrel Hill, Pittsburgh, which is, as I told you, where my mother and my mom's family grew up.
Exactly.
How distant did that seem to you, to work, to be able to make a living in comedy as a kid growing up in Pittsburgh?
Oh my God. I had a vague awareness that a distant uncle that we no longer talk to was a podiatrist to the stars, okay, in Beverly Hills. So that was like my awareness of people actually working in Hollywood. I mean, I didn't know anyone. None of my friends' parents worked in any way in the industry. And I mean, no, and actually I didn't even through college, it only was towards the end of college that I had a sense of like, oh, you're going to move to Chicago to do improv. Even from improv, I wasn't sure where the money was, but that took me till like senior year. Before senior year, I was like, I think you have to be an arts journalist because you can write about the arts. And that's all that I thought. That was the only path I could imagine.
Well, how Squirrel Hill is that? Your only link to celebrity is the podiatrist.
Oh yeah. Oh no. This family we don't talk to anymore. They're definitely they're Squirrel Hill type people. So
you said earlier that you didn't really grow up into comedy as much as your friends, but when you first started getting into comedy, were there influences that you had for comedy for the written page specifically?
Oh yeah. I mean, numero uno, it was a huge thing to just discover the website McSweeney's in 2007, my senior year of college. That was like a friend came up to me in college and was like, you have to look at this website. You're going to love it. I just had never read pointless comedy on the page before. So even just finding about McSweeney's was big. And then it took me to the authors that continue to be my biggest influences, people that I'm huge fans of. Simon Rich, all of his collections, Jack Handy, his novel Stench of Honolulu and his collections. I'm not just going to say people that blurb the book, but Miranda July's first novel, it just, cracked my mind open. It was so original and interesting. And then, I mean, there's this Jon Stewart collection called Naked Pictures of Famous People. Have we talked about that? It's so good. It's so good. There's 2 essays in it. I probably bought that book 5 times because I just always lose it. Yeah. And actually our friend, Michael, our friend Adam Resnick's memoir. Oh my God. I mean, it's, as Bob Odenkirk said, it's the Bible. It
is as good as it gets. So you discovered McSweeney's as a senior in college. What year was that?
That was 2007. I'm 30 years old, right?
Right.
30. Yeah, 2007. I'm 35.
I didn't mean to.
No, that's okay. 35 is still okay to say.
But so McSweeney's had been around for a while at that point. How did you come across it? And the sensibility was very different when it first emerged.
It was. I mean, so you're right. That was super late to get turned on to it. It was going in the 90s. I mean, this just shows like I was so not aware of comedy as an entity unto itself. Even in high school, I think I was a senior. There was there was a girl that was reading a real copy of The Onion, and and there was a headline making fun of the Strokes in some way. I hadn't heard of the Strokes. I hadn't heard of The Onion. I was like, what's that? And with McSweeney's, yeah, when I started reading it, it was really just evergreen. Basically, so it was sillier, and even though, of course, it had satirical pieces, it was way less tied to the news. It wasn't really advocacy comedy the way that a lot of comedy is now. So I don't want to sound like, old man that doesn't like McSweeney's is still great, but it was different when I got
And
in.
here you are, you submitted to McSweeney's, and the first piece you submitted was accepted. When was this?
That was right after I graduated senior year, and it was the first thing that I wrote, and it did get in, and it was so motivating and stabilizing to have one little nugget of this could maybe work, and it really saw me through for the next all the years until, I didn't get something into the New Yorker for maybe 8 more years, and I was submitting during that time.
Yeah, it takes a while. So let's go back a little bit. You talked about improv. How important is improv, not just to a comedic actor or a comedian, but to a comedic writer?
I think it's hugely important. The skills they really just, improv is really, and my friends, I'm like cringing thinking if any friends that are watching, comedy friends of mine who hate improv, but it really is just, writing on the stage, and all the stuff you learn is so transferable to writing. The biggest stuff is, in improv, you learn how to identify the game of the scene and heighten the game. And the biggest credo is yes and there's also a slightly higher level credo, which is no but. And my friend Will Tracy, who's the former editor of The Onion, who's one of the most brilliant writers I know, and my friend Mike, our mutual good friend, he always said that was like the difference between improv and writers. That improv is yes and, writing specifically for The Onion is no but. And I think, both are true, and both are really helpful for writing. And so for anyone who's into comedy writing or maybe improv, improv classes are so helpful. Just, you'll meet people and you will learn, even if it scares you or you think it's lame, I think it will help your writing.
Well, how important is that, to meet people? It's a short phrase, but it means everything, really, because the people that will hire you in the future and the people that you will hire and work with in the future are those that you will come up with.
Totally. I remember, that's true. It's very important. And I do remember before I had any reps of any kind, I was like, oh my God, there's a point in your career when you have agents, and agents just get you work and you can just sit back and like let work roll in. That's just never how it happens. Even though I love all of my agents, it's like you get and make and find the work yourself, like always. So I thought that it would be like this sweet, just gravy train once you had a team, and it's all still self-starting.
Well, it really is. And that's another thing they don't teach you, is that you have to make these opportunities happen. That it's not like baseball where you'll be called up from the minor league to the major leagues, that you have to work for every opportunity.
Exactly. And the only thing that I feel like is heartening is that you don't have to be friends or good friends, as long as you can find someone's email who works at the show you want to work on, and you can just get that packet to submit. They don't have to be your best friend. You just need to be able to find the email so that you can apply, and that can be a friend of a friend. But yeah, a friend of a friend could be all you need to have your name flagged to get a job.
Okay, I wanted to talk to you about this a little bit later, but let's talk about this now. So a lot of people out there who are watching want to write for TV. You made that leap, and we'll talk about how you got into McSweeney's and The Onion later. How did you get your packet into the hands of those who needed to see it at the Late Show? And what do you suggest that a young writer does or doesn't do within that packet?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was working at The Onion, I literally just saw in the news that Stephen was going to take over for Letterman. And I was like, that job would be awesome. I have no idea how to get it. Even though I was at The Onion working there, I still felt just like anyone else who had no connection. How did I actually eventually? Oh yeah. When that was happening in 2013 or 2015, 2015, it was like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory in terms of every person that isn't normal, but everyone I knew in Chicago, in LA, was applying for that job at Colbert because it was like this cool new thing and you didn't know how many people they were going to hire. So I was able to get the packet from, that was like anyone could have gotten it. If you knew anyone in the improv community, a friend of a friend, like forwarded it to me. And it was I'd never written a packet. It was a very open-ended one. So at least normally when you apply to a show, the show exists. So you can watch that show and have some sense of the target you're trying to hit. That wasn't the case for this show, although I knew the target essentially was Stephen's sensibility. I mean, I didn't know, but I just assumed. So I used that to guide me in writing it. All I did was try really hard because I definitely, I was like, why? I had no connection, and I did end up getting it, it was so fun. It was like winning. It really was like getting the golden ticket because everyone I knew applied. However, coming from the Onion was a big leg up. Anyone out there, the Onion is such a wonderful place to be. And then it's so respected that it helps you when you want to leave and do something else.
Did you need an agent to get the packet to someone?
Okay. At that point, I had a manager. I won't go into that saga, but it was like, okay, I won't even say a word, but I sent it in actually on my own because and also through this manager. But I can say now that I've been at Colbert and friends on other shows have confirmed this, it doesn't matter for 1 second if your agent or manager submits your packet or if you do. They don't care. They don't care. So as long as you can find anyone at that show and get the packet and then submit it, it's fine. I mean, once in a while, they'll say they're only taking submissions from repped people. That happens very rarely. And it never happened when I was at Colbert.
Can writers be discovered through written pieces for McSweeney's, New Yorker, or even tweets?
I think, yeah, absolutely. Both. Tweets for sure. I find that on these shows, if you're looking to try to get on a late night show, maybe any show, I don't know, but I know in late night, they'll Google you. So you help your chances if you can possibly have something there when they Google you. And when I got hired at Colbert, I had a teeny tiny Twitter following. It was a couple hundred people, my friends. It didn't matter. I still had like a feed of a bunch of jokes. So they were able to see that like I did it and they didn't care that no one followed me. And yeah, I had McSweeney's pieces, no New Yorker pieces yet. I was definitely still getting rejected.
So you think that even if the jokes are strong and you don't have too many followers, that the producers and others who hire will look at the strength of the jokes? They
absolutely will. I think that if they're great, I think it'll look cool. It does look cool. And I know they don't care. I mean, they didn't care with me. There's hires they've made at Colbert, and those people, it's similar to me when I joined, like really funny jokes, but it's not like they have a huge following. So I think that's a heartening piece of info that I would have liked to know. So yeah, and I think it's true.
All right. So to go back, you went to college at Oberlin?
I went to Barnard, but there's a B. Right. No, please.
Okay. So how did you go from that point to working your way up and meeting people and networking and eventually ending up at the Onion?
I mean, not like every person in comedy that I know, because a few of my friends are so brilliant that I'm thinking, I don't know if Jay, you're watching, one of the head writers of Colbert. He literally gave the valedictorian speech at Princeton and Jon Stewart was there and then hired him. Okay. So I do know people like that, it's just so funny. But my way was the other way that everyone else that I know pretty much had, which is so windy. I mean, I go to Barnard. I then after college, I live in France for a year teaching English at a high school in northern France. And it was sort of a bust of an experience, but it was good because it was just, you got to grab those non-comedy experiences to fold into other stuff. So I did that. And then I was like, I'm moving to Chicago to do improv. There was no other plan. There was no money plan. So I had to kind of scrabble for money to make the rent. My parents were helping me for some of this time. And I did a bunch of jobs, I would just do random gigs that, improv people would do. And some of them were humiliating. And then,
let's talk about some of those improv. I mean, those jobs that you had that were humiliating.
Yeah, I mean,
everyone starts off with humiliating jobs.
right, totally. I mean, one that sticks out is I did a promo gig for DiGiorno where they were introducing their flatbread melts. So I don't know if you're even aware of that product, but this is when they were new. Okay, so I had to dress up as a cop, and I went to downtown Chicago, and I had to hand out citations for eating a boring lunch. So I was supposed to go up to hardworking employees who were on their 10 minutes shoveling a salad into their face and give them a citation. So I basically didn't do that, and I handed out my citations to as many homeless people as I could find, and I collected the money from DiGiorno. So it was stuff like that, and there was some bit. Are you thinking of a bit? What?
No, the citations.
Yeah, the citation. My husband is reminding me that the citation was a coupon to get the flatbread.
Well, so you were dressed up as a cop in Chicago. How dangerous is that to be giving out citations for?
I only killed, I would say, 4. Not gonna go there, but yeah, no. At the time, this was 2009.
Well, you talk about too being a waitress. Was it at?
Oh yeah, I was a hostess at Second City because I was like, I got to get in the building, like, you know, that'll help. And they fired me after a month. I mean, I think they sensed insubordination in me. I mean, I didn't do anything straight up wrong. What I think I was fired for was you wore a black t-shirt that said Second City, and then when the show would go up, I'd be sitting on these little stairs watching the show when the lights were down, and it was freezing in the theater. So I'd put a sweatshirt on or something. And a couple times the manager was like, you got to take that off. And I took it off. But I think.
So they fired you for wearing a sweater over the Second City t-shirt?
Yeah. But not during the show, when the show was going on. But the manager was a notorious character. We'll leave it at that.
So a character meaning an asshole.
Well, I didn't say it, but
you didn't say it. I did. So you went from that. You were fired for being a waitress at Second City for wearing a sweater for being cold during the show. How did you then go to the Onion, which is a notoriously difficult place to break into? A lot of the people at the Onion had been pitching headlines for years before they started getting accepted there. How did you work your way in there?
I got really lucky worming my way in, because you're right, they have a really, really deep bench of contributors, and they always have this pool of contributors that they rely on, and that's usually how they get their fellows. They do this thing where they try out new staff members by letting 2 people come on as fellows for 6 months. You basically work as a full-time staff member for 6 months, and that is an audition. I was able to get in. I had not been a headline contributor. I had no connection with the Onion. I submitted a packet. I had no friends there. That is the biggest break, really, because that was the most being plucked from a pile that I've ever been. And then that 6-month audition was probably the hardest I've ever worked, because every one of the writers on the staff when I was there, I mean, many of them are my closest friends, and they are the funniest, smartest, sharpest comedy minds ever. So and for me, there was a massive learning curve.
Well, let's talk about the learning curve. What was it about that place and that sensibility and that style that was difficult to figure out?
Yeah, because it ended up being good because I was able to squish my weird sensibility into the very carved out, established sensibility of the Onion. And it was wobbly in the beginning because I wasn't doing that enough. And the stuff that I was submitting was a little too just me and not really oniony enough. So I needed to put like the Onion spit shine on my stuff. And when I was able to kind of like figure that out, that's when it started to click, and I started getting stuff in. And even dumb things, like when you start a new thing, you don't know what you don't know. And so in the beginning, I thought I knew the Onion pretty well, but I didn't know lots of little things. Like when you're writing the dateline for a piece that takes place in heaven, because it's a story about God. You write the heavens, not heaven. I wrote heaven instead of the heavens once. And even that, little things like that, they just constantly point you out as someone who doesn't get it and someone who isn't that just isn't totally in the family. And so I needed to kind of beat those things out of me as well.
All right. So the Onion is, well, I should also say and interrupt here. We are taking questions that we're going to answer in the last 10 minutes. So if anyone has any questions, there's an ask a question area at the bottom right. Please send those to us. So with the Onion, what interests me is that it's brilliant, the Onion, but your own voice is difficult to get through sometimes. Was there a frustration on your part that your comedic voice, which is very strong, wasn't coming through in these Onion articles?
I mean, in the beginning, and especially before, in the beginning when the Onion staff were just, when they were strangers and I was totally the new kid and, I'd been there for a few days. I didn't know any of them. Your pitch, it's a nightmare. You go in with 60 jokes, 60 headlines, and you read them to a silent room, just a silent room. I mean, it was such in early days, it was so humiliating and hard. And I would leave the meeting and call my husband and just, and then I wore him out, I couldn't even call him anymore. Then I needed to call other people to just complain. I mean, about like these assholes, they're not taking my jokes. But in the beginning, they really weren't good enough. And I just, but I think I was, but it still really bummed me out. And I didn't have the humility to see that they really weren't up to snuff. And how I made the little change. I mean, it really was just like steeping myself in the archives. And I would just go home and I would have, those like big Onion books that everybody has of like the old issues. I would just toggle between looking at them and then looking at the news. And I would have a Word doc that was like, a gajillion pages of half-baked ideas. And I really just, every day I looked at as like a new chance to try.
So how long did you end up working at the Onion?
3 years.
And from there, you heard about the job opportunity at the Late Show with Colbert. Yeah. And exactly. You applied. And how long did it, you wrote the packet. How long did it take you to find out that they were interested in you?
Yes, I wrote it, and I think it was like 3 weeks later.
That's incredible. So you were called in for an interview. And
yes.
Did Steve interview you?
He did. And, I'm pretty sure he still at least lets people know when he's hiring them. He likes to be there for that. It's a really fun moment. Yeah, it was an interview with first I sent the packet in, and then the little first glimmer of hope was the executive producer of the show, this guy Tom Purcell, who I just love so much. He's so funny. He emailed me. I didn't know who he was, but I knew that was his title, and he was like, "Hi, Stephen Colbert really enjoyed your packet." So that was just like, that just was so exciting. And then I was like, "Ooh, that's good," but there was no info. And then a few days later, Tom was like, "Stephen wants to talk with you." And at that point, I was assuming, okay, I probably have it. I can only lose it. And actually, and that interview, it was like a Zoom interview. And Stephen asked me what my influences were. And I couldn't even though actually Strangers was such a huge influence for me, I couldn't think of a single thing to say except Uncle Buck and Death Becomes Her. They were the only thing I couldn't think of anything else. They really are my biggest influences, but and he didn't, I don't think, like that at all.
How about Problem Child? Was that a big influence?
Actually, no, Mike, that immediately took me back to like room A in the JCC where I watched that on like a rollout TV. Oh yeah, I love Problem Child.
Did you watch alone at the JCC, the television, for all those hours every day? Were you alone?
Emotionally, I was isolated. I felt very alone, but I was surrounded by children.
Okay, so you emotionally, you felt free floating in space like an astronaut on a walk.
Exactly.
So you get the job at Colbert, which to many people is a dream job. And so can you talk about, I asked you this question, I found your answer fascinating. I asked you, were you burned out writing about Trump every day? And you said you weren't, so much as what frustrated you the most was having a lot of your ideas shut down.
Yes. The Trump thing, it makes sense to ask that question. But when you're actually inside of these gigs, at least at Colbert, and I think it's really similar to the other shows, you only have to write about the topical stuff Monday to Thursday in the morning. And then the afternoons and Friday are all about far-reaching evergreen pieces, and I really and I loved working on those. So every day you had like this great like kind of like wash it away and then dive into just like evergreen comedy world. So that helped with that. And then the only thing what I found to be a little more dispiriting was just the rejection. But it didn't feel at all special to that show. It actually almost was less rejection than The Onion, and it actually wasn't. So it wasn't new to me at all. It was just a continuation of what happened at The Onion, which is just you produce so much material, and then so much of it is thrown away. And at Colbert, though, unlike The Onion, sometimes we would have a bigger budget, and of course we could rope in A-list stars. And so sometimes it would be so exciting. Like I remember writing a sketch for Stephen King, and it would have been for Stephen King and Stephen. I wrote it with one of my best friends from Colbert, this guy Mike Brum. He's hilarious, and it was so fun writing. We were just laughing hysterically, writing the script, and it would have been Stephen King is one of my absolute favorite writers, and so you get so excited thinking maybe this can happen, and then so it's a little more of a letdown when it's like, oh no, that's not going to happen. And so because it was exciting, so there just was a lot of that. But then of course there are the things that you do get in that are so fun, and those keep you going.
Well, like what?
Well, let's see. I mean, for me, I pitched something that it actually took 2 Halloweens to get to it, but we would do this bit with Run the Jewels, this rap group Run the Jewels, who were really cool, where I'm obsessed with the song Monster Mash. It's my favorite song, the Halloween novelty song. And I wanted Stephen to have his own very, very kid-friendly, sweet Halloween novelty song. So I wrote the song called The Halloween Wiggle. And it was really, really sweet. And then the idea was that Run the Jewels would then crash the music video, and it would become a really obscene, graphic rap video. And so we did that, and it was awesome. And then we did a bunch more of these videos with Run the Jewels, and I would write the songs, I would write the raps, and I would have to go down into the booth and like tell Run the Jewels how to rap it. It was horrifying. So uncomfortable. They were really friendly, but I mean, sometimes it could be really embarrassing if they were like, the scansion just doesn't track here and it's bad. And I'd be like, someone was stupid who wrote it.
Can you sing a little bit of the Wiggle song?
Oh God. Okay. Mom and Dad, don't listen to this part. The Run the Jewels rap started, drop that pumpkin down low and make my fun size sticky. I'm about to find out if you treaty or tricky. Drop that pumpkin down low and make my fun size sticky. That was why I wanted to do it. And so then I wrote other words around that.
That's something you don't hear in Squirrel Hill.
No.
All right, so you have this job, and then you're not only a writer, you're an announcer. And so how long did you work at The Late Show?
I worked at The Late Show for 4 years, and I'm still the announcer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a job that I imagine is exhausting in the sense that TV is a monster that you have to feed it every single day.
Yes.
Was there a sense of burnout for 4 years, having to write jokes every day, most of which never appeared on the show?
Yes. I mean, for me, the burnout was I had this other burning interest, which was working on this book of short stories. And so I was so interested in that I did start to resent other things I had to do. And so I started to really want to give all my time to working on this book, and getting the book deal enabled me to do that.
How did you get the book deal, and did being in the New Yorker help?
Yes. I mean, that was another thing where I was like, how do people do this? You know, like I mean, when I started Colbert, I didn't have a lit agent, but I got the book deal by finding this wonderful guy, Dan Greenberg, my literary agent. Do you know Dan?
I'm a part of the agency.
Oh, Michael. Wait a second. Okay. We'll discuss that later. But yeah, this guy, Dan, he's so smart and funny. And he was like, if you want to do a book of short stories, well, number one, you know, they're really hard to sell. You kind of need to be famous to do them. And but I really wanted to. And so he was like, okay, we'll come up with like 50 pages of new stuff that hasn't been published. And so the stuff that we ended up showing to Random House was 50 pages of new things that had not been published. And I think we threw in a couple of, of pieces that had been, just because we were like, we felt that those were pretty good. And that was, and then really luckily, these two guys at Random House, these editors that I just adore, Ben Greenberg and Andy Ward, they're so smart and funny. They liked it. And so then I got lucky again.
So how did you get into the New Yorker? Were you writing for Colbert when you first got published in the New Yorker? A lot of people out there I know want to be published in the New Yorker. How did you make that leap?
I mean, it took a really long time, I guess 8 years of getting rejected. And actually, as I was getting rejected, almost every single time, I even enjoyed it because I felt like I was corresponding with the New Yorker. When they would email me back, I'd be like, all right, you've let me know. And even that actually was a little bit motivating. I was at Colbert when I got in. And I don't know if that maybe somehow helped. I don't think it did. I just think the stuff I started submitting was way better than it had been. It was lame before.
So what do you suggest for the young writers or any writers out there who want to get into the New Yorker, into the Shouts and Murmurs section?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you try to be really, really familiar with the stuff that they publish. And so you really steep yourself in their archives and, so you're aware of the target that you have to hit and what sensibilities they like. And then I think the trick is giving them something with just a little bit of torque, something that's a little bit not exactly like what they do. Although actually, if you can do something exactly like what they do, that'll probably work. But in terms of making it exciting for yourself, I think it's a balance of looking and seeing what they publish and then inspiring yourself with the things that keep you juicy and, interested in writing.
So you've talked about making a leap with a certain piece that you felt sort of, this is it. You sort of reached your cruising altitude. Can you talk about that piece?
Was it one of the pieces in the book?
Yes.
Ooh, well, it was either one of two pieces, because the first piece that I wrote that, like, when I left Colbert, I had really only done stories. First, I only wrote stories that were really a page long for the New Yorker. And then to get the book deal, I wrote stories that were like 6 or 7 or maybe 9 or 10 pages. And that was very much the limit. And I had never written a story that sustained itself beyond that. And then when I left Colbert, the first story I wrote out of it was a story called Birthday Girl. And that was so fun to write because it really surprised me. And it was maybe like 25 pages. And I felt like I was in the Wild West creatively, first of all, because I was no longer working on a staff. And so every decision came to me. And that was really, really fun. Even though, of course, that sometimes that was a little bit, it was scary because I had no one to blame it on, like if it sucked, it was like, there was no beloved peer that I could point to and be like, it's his fault. But yeah, Birthday Girl, it surprised me. It was exciting. It was so un-TV friendly. And that was really, really fun. And then the other one is the title story, the novella, because it's a novella. And I had so much faith in the story, and I was getting it so wrong for 2 years as I was working on that story. And then the last draft, I cracked it.
This is I find really interesting, is that when you write for TV, it's incredibly powerful. You have millions of people reading or listening to your jokes. But when you write for the page, there's fewer people, but you have more control over what you're writing. How important is that control for you as a writer?
Unfortunately, it has totally scrambled my DNA. I am obsessed with the control. It was so fun to have it, especially because on staffs so far, the 2 that I've been on, I have been traditionally reined in. Jokes have been made at my expense about my alternative sensibility. And so essentially that just meant, like, don't ask Jen. Jen's going to say that's not too weird or dark or evil, and it's not like it's only I like evil things, but getting to choose was just so fun. Of course, the only downside is I am I am sort of social, and so the fun of like laughing with coworkers, often not about what you're working on, but some other adjacent topic. I do miss that, and I mean, I miss writing with people, but it's just it's so exciting and scary. It was really scary to get to make the decisions in a fun way,
and yet exciting in the sense that you are in control.
Oh yeah, I mean, for someone that's coming from TV, first of all, forgetting even about rejection, but just thinking about casting and budgets. There's just no's all over the place. You have to like live in reality, and you're not going to be able to get that person. You're not going to be able to get that prop. But writing these stories, I mean, some of these stories, one story started off as a sketch for The Late Show. It's called The Secret History of the Women's Club. When it eventually got rejected, I adapted it for this collection, and so then I cast it exactly how I wanted to, with all the most powerful women in the world, and most are living and a few are dead, and the casting alone, if you came from a TV world, then going to fiction, it almost makes you feel giddy. It's so freeing.
How would you describe your style, your comedic style in this book?
Yes. I guess I would say like surreal dark comedy with a light touch, but I guess that's not really, it's very silly and playful. It's silly and playful, but there's sharp satirical jabbing throughout, because I just can't help making points that I feel strongly about, because I'm a be me.
You're not a baby. You're a very talented woman.
Thank you.
Let's talk about your piece in the book on the snowman, which I absolutely love. And it reminded me of the work of Doug Kenney, who's one of my favorite comedy writers. He wrote for early National Lampoon, and then co-wrote Animal House and Caddyshack.
I looked him up when you told me about him, and then I read about his horrible end.
He had a very sad ending. He either committed suicide or fell to his death in Hawaii at a very young age, 32 or 33.
Exactly, in Kauai, right.
But it was what he would do a lot is from a 1950s or 60s perspective, write these stories that were very dark. And they started off as, like Your First Dance, and then it would segue into something very dark. And it reminded me of that snowman piece and the other pieces in the book.
Yes, you mentioned him, and he's on my list now. I really want to check out his stuff. Yes, that is something that is very fun to play with, I think, because in general, riffing on that collision of childlike innocence meeting adult pain, and the real world, that awakening, go like from innocence to, understanding how it is. I find it such a funny transition, because it can be so, it can just be so sad. I guess there's some, that's where it's just like, we laugh to survive, because it's just so sad. I mean, when you learn about death, it's so depressing. And it's kind of fun to joke about it. So yeah, that, and the story that I played with, that snowman story is so beloved, and it's such a magical, whimsical story. And I just thought it'd be funny to tell a similar story of a child's awakening, but in a less lyrical, in a grittier way.
So grittier and less lyrical means that the snowman plays with his stick penis.
Plays with his stick penis, Michael. Exactly. And there's a lot of playing. There is some playing with yourself in this collection, and we had to space those stories out.
Well, there's some playing with yourself in this interview.
Wow. Oh my God.
No, I'm not Governor Cuomo. I won't.
Oh.
But what I loved about that snowman piece is that it wasn't just getting dirty. It was the sadness of the snowman taking the child on his back as he flew and ending up at his ex-wife's house. That, to me, I thought was a stroke of genius.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, because that is sad. Something like that's mundane That's really sad. And I love that. And that just makes me think of actually my friend Django suggested a detail that I used in this Monster Goose story, which is basically a retelling of an R.L. Stine Goosebumps story, whatever. There's just a detail that has to do with parents arguing on the phone with insurance companies. And I was like, yes, that's very, very relatable and sad. And sprinkling in those really, really precise, relatable details, that's also an Onion thing, because you have to be able to do that at the Onion to make things really lifelike.
So if anyone has any questions, please let us know, and hopefully the Strand, those in charge of this can forward those to us. I don't really see any questions as of now, but anyway. So where next for you? I mean, you have written for TV, you've written for print, you've now written a book, and you're still very young. And what do you think is next for you?
Well, I just want to keep doing TV and books. So I know that I want to keep doing these short story collections. I've been sketching out a novel. It's writing. One of the stories in this collection is a novella, and that made me think. And that seemed out of reach to me before I wrote it, and I was like, gee, I don't know if I can do this because I never have. And then having done it and feeling really good about where I took it, I'm like, whoa, maybe I want to write a novel. So I've been playing with that. But since I'm used to writing these short stories, I'm wondering if I can deal with not finishing it so soon. That seems a little daunting, but more books and then TV stuff. Some of these stories in this collection, I feel like could have lives outside of the book. And so I'm interested in working on those.
Great. Some questions have come in. It says, do the ideas for your pieces change mid-process, or do you tend to stick with the idea that you get as you go into the piece?
I think that the germ of whatever I thought made it funny, when I really early on in writing it, I brainstorm different ideas to see, does this idea even have legs at all? And then if there's even just 3 or 4 jokes that I feel are really, really solid, those will always stay in. And then I'll surprise myself by filling out the kind of interstitial stuff. But usually it's the first thing that inspired me to write the piece that struck me as funny, that will stay.
So you have to remain true to what you originally found funny. Sometimes you can overthink it and lose track of what was funny to begin with. Exactly.
You have to just remember that first thing that strikes you as funny. You have to just remember that because, yeah.
So really good questions here. And this is one that I feel very strongly about. What's up with Chicago? How important was the stand-up environment there for you and others? I think Chicago, from what I've heard, is a terrific city to start as a young writer.
I agree. And it's funny because I remember doing an event with the Onion at Brown, and I asked the students in the audience where they were moving after college, and everyone said New York or LA. So I don't know if Chicago is not cool anymore and it's not a place, but I loved that it wasn't New York or LA. I went to college in New York and I wanted to leave. That actually felt like the more cool alt thing to do than stay. And I didn't want to go to LA. I mean, Chicago they're really, really funny people. And yes, it's not an industry town. So you kind of have you don't have this grinding sense of, people that are real and so much more important than you, like you would in LA or even New York. People aren't that much more important than you because they're in Chicago. And
it's also very affordable.
Exactly. Oh my God, it's so much cheaper. Yeah, it's literally just cheaper to live. And that helps.
Another question, what was your relationship between your day job at Colbert and writing the short stories? Did you come home from work exhausted, light a candle like Tolstoy and write?
Yes, that's exactly what I did. I mean, I did light a candle and I was tired, but it was exciting to work on these things because it was so fun because they were mine. So yeah, I mean, between 8 and 11, that was the time that I had for me.
That's another thing they don't teach in school, how hard it is to not only create, but to excel. And it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, a lot of effort. I remember one time hearing Lin-Manuel Miranda say Lin-Manuel Miranda, he said, you're going to have to say no to so many things, like so many social things and friends. And I loved, whenever I heard him say that, I was so happy, because I all the time was like, I wanted to say yes to certain things. And I was like, no, I guess I should really stay in and work on this if I ever want to do it.
Yeah, it takes a tremendous amount of work. How has your husband supported you during this process? Asked Miles.
Oh, is that Miles Manasci? I wonder. Okay. I mean, it just can't be overstated. It's the book really is a collaboration with him. For me, I'm always so curious about other writers. Thomas, my husband, is my first reader. And so I write a piece and I really have no idea sometimes if it's awesome or horrible. And then I show it to Thomas, and then it lives or dies by his thumbs up or down. And my husband is like the funniest. This is why I selected him. He's the funniest, smartest actor and writer. And so he'll be my reader, and then he'll be my editor. And his hands are on it the whole time.
All right, 2 more questions. This is a really good one. You mentioned a couple of times that your early writing wasn't up to snuff. How do you think you've improved as a writer over the years? What do you understand about writing now that you didn't when you first started submitting? This is from Paul.
That's a great question. I think that the more you do it, the more you see things that are too, like when I first started writing at The Onion, I learned so many words that I didn't even know meant bad writing. You know, like I learned all these different ways that the jokes could be bad. Like they could be too familiar. They could be too soft. You know, they could be sarcastic, not a hard joke. But you only get that really fine perspective when you kind of just, I think, steep yourself in it and read it so much. So I think that you get better by reading other people's work that's really, really good that you admire. So then it kind of like, then you have these examples of good stuff. You actually have to try it yourself, because there's so much trying for you make mistakes you don't even know you're making. And I remember like early on being told that, never mention anything with like zombies or pirates. Don't say the word hellscape. There were certain things where I was like, oh, I didn't even know that those were so played. But people in comedy are like, oh, don't ever mention those things.
You mentioned reading things that are good and that you can learn from. Can you learn from things that are not written well? In fact, quite bad pieces of comedy. Can you learn what not to do?
I think so, because you pay attention to your reaction. And if something strikes you as incredibly, corny or just unoriginal, then pay attention to why it feels so unoriginal. And yeah, I absolutely, both are instructive.
All right, so this is from, actually there's Ballard from Facebook. What was the hardest story to write in the book? What was the most fun to write?
Ballard Boyd, I love you, and you already know that. The hardest one to write was definitely that title story, Big Time, just because it was the most ambitious one. And it was such a huge chunk. I had just never bit off something that big where I wanted to tell this Hollywood rags to riches story. And I wanted it to be really funny, but I also needed to tell a real story about a character that hopefully you'd really care about, who has an outlandish past. And so that one was hard to crack, and cracking it came with realizing how conversational it actually wanted to be. And when I finally keyed into her voice, my main character's voice, that cracked it for me. And then was the other question, what was the easiest one?
What was the most fun to write?
The most fun to write was actually that snowman story, because it really just like popped out. I wrote it when it was around Christmas. We had a Christmas tree in the apartment, and the tree was just like glowing, and I would just come home, and it was so fun to slip into that world. It was such a gentle, happy world.
All right, so here's the last question. This is my question. What would you recommend to those young comedy writers out there who want to have a career in comedy writing?
I would say to just really obsessively read the stuff that you think is good and that inspires you, and that will help make you so much better. And then you can do the things that that no one can tell you. You can tweet and you can write short stuff, and no one needs, that's what's awesome about being a writer. And so many writers say this, unfortunately for actors, for musicians, they need other people to do their work. But the lucky thing for you, if you choose writing, is you don't need other people. So the only thing you have to figure out is making yourself right. And that's hard. But if you can, you just have to force yourself to get pages out.
Right. And we're in a time where writers can be seen by or read by more people than any time in history. So if you're a young writer, there's tremendous opportunity out there for you. You just have to do the work and put your head down and keep moving forward.
Exactly.
So I want to thank you so much. I'm a big fan of your writing. I'm a big fan of you. The book is tremendous. I love the book. And please, everyone go out and get it. It's one of my favorites from the past few years. Jen, thank you so much.
Mike, thank you so much. You're one of my favorite comedy writers. I can't believe you interviewed me. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Mike, for joining us tonight. If our wonderful audience hasn't already bought their copy, you can purchase a copy of Big Time Stories with the purchase link at the bottom of your screen. Is there anything you both would like to say to our audience before we sign off for the night?
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate everyone who came. Thank you.
I just like to say that I'm very particular when it comes to comedy, and this is a book. If you're going to get a comedy book, get this one, because this one is very, very good.
Wow.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, our wonderful audience. Everyone stay safe out there. Wear your masks. Don't touch anything you're not supposed to. And we'll see you at our next Strand event. Have a good night.
Thank you.